Hey guys, what's up? आज का जो guest episode है, it is with the filmmaker Sudhir Mishra. Sudhir sir is one of the finest filmmakers of our country. He has made films like Hazaaron Khwaishein Aisi, Chameli और भी बहुत शानदार films उन्होंने बनाई हैं. His recent film Afwaah released just a few days back and you have to watch it. एक apology मैं देना चाहता हूँ इस episode के लिए. वो पूरी की पूरी मेरी गलती है and I take the full responsibility. इसमें production quality इतनी अच्छी नहीं है from the guests end. हमें थोड़ा उस पर और मेहनत करनी चाहिए थी बट लाइक बहुत सारे कंस्ट्रेंट्स थे एंड उस वजह से वो नहीं हो पाया. सो प्लीज़ बेयर विद इट. हम बहुत सोच रहे थे इसको कैसे बेटर करें, हमने एडिट में करने की भी कोशिश की है बट लाइक कंपेयर टू द अदर एपिसोड्स द प्रोडक्शन क्वालिटी इज़ नॉट दैट गुड. बट अगर आप वहाँ पेशेंस रख सकते हैं, इफ़ यू कैन पुट अप विद इट, यू आर गोइंग टू गेट सच अ वंडरफुल एपिसोड बिकॉज सुधीर सर के रिकमेंडेशंस नेक्स्ट लेवल है एंड वी वर ऑल्सो वेरी अमेज्ड. यार होली शिट, लाइक मजा ही आ गया उनके रिकमेंडेशन सुन के. सो प्लीज ये एपिसोड देखें एंड अगेन माई अपॉलॉजीज की प्रोडक्शन क्वालिटी इज नॉट दैट ग्रेट. वी आर ट्राइंग टू वर्क ऑन इट एंड धीरे धीरे यू आर गोइंग टू सी अ लॉट मोर एपिसोड्स ऑन द चैनल which are short offline, which have like better production quality. So yes, that was it from my end. Now let's jump right inside the episode Hindol and I did with Sudhir Mishra sir.
I consider filmmaking or whatever a constant process of writing. I think the first person I got fascinated with was Tagore. Documentaries that pretend to be real, I don't like them. You sell poverty and then have wine and Khan. Scorsese is a great filmmaker, but he's not understood enough. A lot of namby-pamby liberal bleeding hearts get very upset with his violence.
Hi Sudhir sir, welcome to Chalchitra Talks. कैसे हैं आप?
पता नहीं, आजकल ट्रिक क्वेश्चन है, कैसा है किसी को पता नहीं. फिलहाल ठीक ठाक है.
तो मेरे को किसी ने सजेस्ट किया था कि यार लाइक मूवीज से स्टार्ट मत करना, सुधीर सर की बुक्स की जो उनकी फेवरेट बुक्स है उसके बारे में लोगों को नहीं पता है. लाइक व्हाट इज दिस काइंड ऑफ स्टफ ही लाइक्स टू रीड. सो आई वांटेड टू स्टार्ट विद बुक्स. So can you first take us with your relationship with books?
I grew up in a small town. I was in a place called Sagar, and we were the children of heads of departments. So university हमारे चाचा की थी. So we had access to the library. So I kind of spent a lot of time in the fiction section of the library. I lived less in Sagar and a lot in the mind heads of a lot of writers. So I mean I have a very eclectic, I read everything that was there. I read very obtuse stuff which my parents didn't want me to read, and I read thrillers, and for example, I read every James Hadley Chase book, right? I also read Faulkner and Joyce, and the university had a very, very good in Hindi and English department, so I read every poet. So I mean, I don't know if people even know what I'm going to start talking about. If I say I read Mukti Bodh, then does anybody remember Mukti Bodh? If I say I read Agay, and then I went on to Urdu poetry and I read Iqbal and everybody, and then I read Ismat Chugtai, and then I read Manto, and then so I mean, I read it very eclectically. I mean, I didn't think this was great or this was not great, right? So I even read, I mean, kind of sexy novels, right, when growing up. So I mean, every kid likes to discovers about life from books, and we discovered the facts of life through books because parents didn't tell us about that.
I want to ask you, which is your first ever like reading memory? कि okay, this is I think my first movie. जैसा होता है ना कि थिएटर पहली बार गए तो उसकी एक मेमोरी होती है.
My first reading memory is the poems of Tagore. I found the collection of Tagore in a bookshelf of my parents, and somebody had presented the complete works of Tagore to them, right, in English. So, and that was there. So I mean, I remember reading that, and poems like "Where the Mind Is Without Fear" or whatever. And then, I mean, because I had a lot of, my father had a lot of Bengali friends, they would kind of translate them for me in Bengali. So I think the first person I got fascinated with was Tagore. If you were from Lucknow, then for every occasion there is a sher and a ghazal and a poem and a nazm. So I mean, my father and his brothers were constantly quoting Majaz and Faiz. There are also thrillers, and the first, I mean, a book that I remember very, very clearly is a book called No Kids from Miss Blandish by James Handley Chase. If you ask me which is the first book that blew my mind, it's a book called The Naked and the Dead by Norman Mailer. Anti-war novel, and I remember as a kid, I couldn't sleep for many days after I read that book. Right. So I mean, I had that kind of upbringing, and you grew up in a house where there was very little money and a lot of books.
So I think Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five is also in the anti-war genre, right?
Yeah, yeah. Vonnegut is quite a favorite of young people. I mean, you also read books that you shouldn't read as a kid, and I would recommend. I mean, if you read, because my father had all these books, and you pick up a book called I Saved by Camus. And I also read Premchand. I remember being very enamored by a short story of Premchand called Bade Bhai Sahab. I think I learned about the reality of India a lot from Premchand. And then I read mostly everything that Premchand did, So those are very early memories. And then every kid also grows up with their grandmothers. So my grandmothers keep reading the Mahabharata out to me. And then my father was a film society founder, so I saw all sorts of films which I shouldn't have seen as a kid. I mean, which is why I'm messed up like I am.
सर महाभारत से याद आया, हमारा एक बुक क्लब है हमारे पूरे चैनल का. लाइक वी हैव लाइक 1,70,000 सब्सक्राइबर्स. सो हमारे हर महीने हम एक किताब सेलेक्ट करते हैं जो सारे लोग पढ़ते हैं. सो सर, अगर आप हमारे चैनल पे कोई एक ऐसी किताब चाहेंगे जो सब साथ में पढ़ें, लाइक इन लाइक द कमिंग मंथ्स, की लेट्स ऑल रीड दिस वन बुक टुगेदर, सो व्हाट वुड यू पिक?
I mean, in these times, I think one should read Montoya a lot. There's a writer, I don't know, many people have heard of him. His name is E.L. Doctorow. He wrote a book called Book of Daniel, which is quite a favorite of mine, because it's about two people whose parents are condemned, two young people who grew up as orphans because their parents were accused of being communists. And slowly they discover the facts of how their parents. So it's about the madness of America at a particular point where there was a hysteria. I love Doctorow. I think I love Murakami. I really like Pamuk. I mean, everybody should read. There's so much. I mean, you can't even. I'm at the moment reading this book, which won the Booker, the Hindi book. The lady's written it. What's her name?
Gitanjali.
Gitanjali.
Yeah.
That's the book that I'm reading at the moment. It's quite a book. It's startling. Everybody should in Hindi read the work of Uday Prakash. I think Neeli Chhatri Wali and all the books, that his short stories, and everything. And it's a pity that a person of the stature of Uday Prakash is not well known. I mean, now that you start talking, everybody should read Vinod Kumar Shukla's Naukar Ki Kameez, one of the great works of Indian fiction, which I don't think anybody's read. I mean, of course, many people have read. I don't know if the young have read Rag Darbari. There's a hell of a lot of reading available. People are writing. A lot of people are writing now, and is anybody reading? I don't know.
Yeah. What's your opinion of self-help books, and have you ever read a self-help book?
No. I guess I'm maybe working. I mean, I had good parents, so I didn't need. I mean, those that grow up with flawed parents or something maybe need those books. Okay. I had a university professor as a dad, and he was a good friend of mine. I mean, in fact, I had such good parents and I had such a good relation. My mother just died, and she was 92. My father died 2 years ago. He was 91. I mean, I grew up in a family which kind of loved me a lot. I wasn't flawed at all, so any advice I needed, like self-help, I got from them. So I never read them, no.
And are you into graphic novels?
I mean, what is graphic novels? See, as a child, how did I first start reading? Let's go back. Probably the reason why I also became a filmmaker, partly. There was an uncle of mine who had grown up quite a lot, but he hadn't stopped reading comics. He used to pretend that he bought comics for me. So as a kid, I probably had the largest comic collection as any kid. I had thousands of comics. This is Lucknow, and there is a shop called A.H. Wheeler, and everybody, when the new comics came, everybody went to A.H. Wheeler. We bought the first comics, right? So, I mean, graphic novels is a bit of that, and I don't know where those books have gone, but there used to be a set of comics called Classics Illustrated. All the great books of the world were in comic form. I first read all the great novels of the world in comic form. So whether it is Three Musketeers or Alexander Dumas or Jules Verne, or whether Shakespeare or Hamlet, and I think they're available in some like, limited editions and pretty expensive. It used to be something called Classics Illustrated, and I grew up with Mad Magazine,
Mm.
And we were growing up, Mad Magazine was, you weren't cool if you didn't read that. I think my sense of humor or the madness of my way of thinking kind of is very influenced by Mad Magazine.
Right.
So so that's what it was. I haven't read any of the later
Got it. But sir, who is your all-time favorite superhero?
all-time favorite superhero is Batman,
Any specific reason?
because he's more normal. He's kind of gray, kind of wondering whether what he's doing is right or wrong. He's in some dilemma. Superman is too clean. But I read every comic, Thor, Magnus the Robo Fighter. I don't know where those comics have gone. But this was a world where robos had taken over and Magnus was fighting. It's quite a futuristic. I don't know where those books have gone. All the Phantom comics, even in Hindi and English, in Hindi, So that was quite. So, we grew up in those books, and there are some books I can't tell you about.
This was a great segment on books, but now I also want to talk about TV shows with you. Hindal was telling me, and I got very happy that you are a big fan of the shows Succession and Better Call Saul. If you have to choose, which is like a better show according to you, Succession or Better Call Saul?
Better Call Saul.
Our audience would be so happy with your answer.
Better Call Saul by far. Succession is brilliant. So and the way it's shot, the way the characters are dealt with, the way it's. In fact, Succession, when you see, you want to sort of rethink about how you make films. It's good. But as a piece of writing, as a piece of character analysis, where Saul is brilliant because it never tries to be interesting.
Right.
By not trying to be clever or interesting at all, and by just following this compulsive asshole, you kind of arrive at so much ideas about life and many things. I just thought the way they ended it was mind blowing.
Would you rate it above Breaking Bad also?
Yes, I would. It's a masterpiece of writing. It should be taught in every
film school.
I think Better Call Saul also the directors, it's a very. It's my view, again, not necessarily true, is I consider filmmaking or whatever a constant process of writing. So I think you write it when you think of it, when you put it on paper. You write it when you shoot it, when you put an actor in between and your camera. You put music, you edit, you whatever. So it's very brilliantly written overall.
Right.
It's how a show should be. You can feel Albuquerque. You can feel it.
Is there any particular moment that stood out for you in the show?
So many, But what really stood out for me was this guy, when he decides to send the girl, in a sense, he is kind of allowing her to escape. You don't expect that from him.
Right.
That humanity from this guy, But there are so many moments, and it's a very, very interesting show in that because you can't predict how people will behave, It's not even trying to be dark in an obsessive sort of compulsive, in India they say be dark. It's not. It's just, it's the lack of cleverness, the lack of trying to be anything, other than true, is what's, it's very brilliantly, whoever that writer's room is something else.
Yeah.
I would love to, in fact, be part of.
Since I already knew about you liking these two shows, but what are those other shows that you really like?
In India, I like the first season of Secret Games. I like Patal Lok. I like Gullak. I like the work that the TVF boys do. They do it in a quirky, interesting sort of way without trying to be, cool. It's quite a, I think they relate a lot to a younger abroad. I really love the show called Leftovers. Not many people like it. Everybody likes, but those are older shows. The Wire. I really like Boardwalk Empire.
Interestingly, the hit record of HBO is crazy because all three shows you mentioned, The Wire, Broadwalk Empire, Leftovers, all HBO, and I'm highly obsessed with how they are able to come up with one great show after the other. HBO is killing it.
Again, because they're telling very interesting stories in a without trying to be sensationalist in a way, or edgy or anything. They're just they're working on great material, and I think they're allowing the creators more freedom. So none of their it's not like it's to a pattern, right? In India, I like scam a lot of good work. Let's have more there, but yeah.
So now I also want to talk to you about documentaries, and the first documentary I want to
The,
talk.
the, the work that Devan and all did in those anthologies, that's quite good.
Konkana
Yeah.
Ascension and
Gili
Konkana
Pucci. Gili Pucci.
Yeah, that is very good.
Sir, like I want to now talk about documentaries, and like from documentaries, I want to first start with Bavraman, and I want to know what's your opinion of the documentary which was made on you, Bavraman.
What I liked about Babraman was that Jaideep Verma, who made is not sort of, it wasn't like an adulatory kind of geography,
Mhm.
right? So in fact, he's kind of seeing me as an example of why people of talent in India don't reach their potential.
Right.
What's wrong with us, in one sense?
Mhm.
Why do we, fall off the cliff, and not fly? Something happens, right? Why do we get so easily satisfied? What is it that makes us not cross that line, into greatness, right? So I think those are things that obsess him, and that's the questioning that he's using me to, to talk about that, I think.
And like tell us about some of your favorite documentaries of all time.
So again, there's so many of them, but all the films made by Apna Michael Moore, he's kind of redefined that genre in many, very, many interesting ways. So I really like the work of Michael Moore. What Scorsese does with documentaries, you see the Lost Wars, for instance,
Right, right.
which is that Bond, where the films that he's made with about George Harrison. I think documentaries that pretend to be real,
Mhm.
I don't like them because
Mhm.
documentaries are also fiction.
Right.
You leave out something, you select something. Instead of fake actors, you take so-called real actors, but the real actors are also acting. For example, when you go into a disaster zone and you put a camera, you change that reality.
Mhm.
People begin performing. Some person cries, right? But it's a performance.
Right.
So, I mean, it's documentaries are, kind of, I don't know, you have to be very careful with it. So-called pretense of reality, right? You sell poverty and then have wine and Khan, you know, doesn't sit well with me. I've not done documentaries, but my brother passed away and he was making a documentary. So I went to complete it. I went into a tribal area. I'm shooting those tribals, but my unit is eating and those tribals are standing around and I can't eat because they haven't eaten for days and they don't have clothes on them. And I'm making a film so-called on how the ethnographic film on them. So I kind of couldn't complete the film. I told somebody complete it and I walked. Because I couldn't take the what I was doing, right? It was so exploitative, I thought. I much prefer, the pretense of big commercial films. They're not pretending, right? They're just saying this fake world, have fun. The so-called, pretense of realism is pretty, for me, not doesn't work. The great thing about this medium is somebody can do the opposite of exactly what I'm saying and make a great thing. So there's always a possibility that someone can make a great documentary like that. There's a great Brazilian photographer, a French who now lives and has reforested some area. That documentary on him was pretty interesting. But I like documentaries which are agreeing that where you can see the artifice, where you can see the camera, where you can see the, you know, that I'm intruding, right? I'm there, you know, it's not, there's no pretense. But, you know, we have had a we have great documentary companies. For example, Anand Patwardhan, who makes essays almost. His films are kind of essays, right?
Mhm.
He's reflecting on things, right? Ram Ke Naam. I would recommend everybody to see Patwardhan if you want to be a documentary filmmaker. Anand is and he is stuck to who he is, you know, which is very rare for an Indian.
And what's your opinion of the documentary filmmaker Werner Herzog? Like, what's your opinion of him as a person also?
We all grew up idolizing him, you know. We was our idol, you know. He was this filmmaker who went into the Amazon, you know, shot in difficult circumstances. Klaus Kinski, the actor, wanted to go and he put a gun on his head and all these legends about Herzog, you know. Time in German cinema where there's Herzog and Fassbinder and Reinhard Hoff. I really like that period in German cinema.
Mhm.
It's quite a amazing period. The 70s, 60s, 80s.
Are there any films from that period that you would like to recommend?
The many. I mean, everybody should see Fassbinder's Marriage of Maria Braun. Veronica Voss. Why does Mr. R run amok? Aguirre, Wrath of God. That period, you know, in German cinema is it's quite amazing. There's a filmmaker called who made a film. I forget his name is Reinhard Hoff. All of them are. There was something going on in Germany at that time. The post-war, you know, the way they handled it's quite amazing. I quite love that the Italians and the Germans.
Any particular film that like came out from India recently that like really stood out for you?
I mean, I'll tell you some people whom I like. I like Ghewan. I like Amit Masurkar. I mean, of course, I like Kashyap a lot, right? I mean,
Mhm.
Black Friday is one of the great films of Indian cinema. Anubhav Sinha has gone into a very interesting metamorphosis from Mulk to Article 15 to Tappad. There's something interesting happening here, you know. You know, so I quite like it. I like the work of, I'm quite eclectic. I think, you know, Chaitanya Tamane, Umesh Kulkarni, Marathi filmmakers, the middle of the road Tamil cinema. I mean, who's the guy who made Super Deluxe?
Tyagarajan and Kumar.
What is happening there is quite interesting. And everybody, and what is interesting that's happening in the age of OTT
Mhm.
is that Indians are finally seeing films of each other. Otherwise, you were not seeing. But today, it's all coming on the same, and you can click and see a Tamil film.
Mhm.
And I think that will change cinema a lot. People are not just inspired by who's next door and in their own region or in their own language. I think, for example, you know, we'll all influence each other a lot. You only don't know Wong Kar Wai, you also know the guy next door, you know.
Exactly. I want to like take a moment and talk about Chaitanya Damane because I think he is one of the most interesting voices in India right now. So I want to know which film of his did you like more, Court or The Disciple?
Court. Court was quite fascinating the way, I mean, the form itself and the way he dealt with actors, the way the scenes played out. They were held to the point where you thought it would become boring, but they became fascinating because they were held like that, you know. And you explored the human condition in a way which is quite interesting. It went beyond its so-called apparent subject matter.
I'll give you like a quick question. Like if you had to choose one filmmaker from Scorsese, Spielberg, or Tarantino, which one would it be?
That's a very easy answer, Scorsese. By miles.
Right.
No comparison.
Oh, okay. Which is your favorite Scorsese movie?
It's difficult to choose, but you know, Raging Bull, Taxi Driver. You know, I even like Wolf of Wall Street. There is so much in his films, you know, and he's you know using the medium in such a lot of interesting ways. He's the only one keeping cinema alive, you know, because everyone else is doing fucking coverage.
Yeah.
Everyone is covering scripts. I mean, this is the era of the so-called writer, no?
Right.
So you cover dialogue, you know. He's the only one who's using one of the few people. Of course, Tarantino, I mean, Pulp Fiction is a great film, right? I mean, I'm not knocking anything, right?
Right.
You just, I mean, for example, the skill of Spielberg, you know, If you see, for instance, Close in Town, the way he just uses the medium, just the way he creates an atmosphere just by visuals and the edit and everything. Very few people can do that. He's a filmmaker. But when you ask me to choose, it's Scorsese by miles.
And how did you like The Irishman?
Loved it. He does so many things. He tells you the history of America, in such a lot of interesting ways, and he talks about power in such interesting ways. Even though John Kennedy or Robert Kennedy are not obvious characters in the film, they are present and it's about them also. Scorsese is a great filmmaker, but he's not understood enough. So a lot of people, a lot of namby-pamby liberal bleeding hearts get very upset with his violence or something, He and Kieslowski, I think, and Fellini are the three great filmmakers.
Which is your favorite movie among the Three Color trilogy?
Red by far. I really love Red. But I have three great films. The greatest filmmaker of all time is Fellini, followed very closely by Ray and Ghatak.
Sir, as a Bengali, I need to ask you this question, and I'm not being controversial, but I need to ask you this. Ray or Ghatak, whom would you rate as the better filmmaker?
I mean, that's an unnecessary controversy,
Yeah, which is why I said I need to ask you this.
When I was young, I was caught up in the passion of Ghatak. But as I grow older, I think the first set of films of Ray and the first set of films of Ghatak are some of the most outstanding work India has ever done. Right. So I don't think one should get into that. I'm kind of 25% Bengali, and one of my gurus was a man called Badal Sarkar.
Right.
So I wouldn't get into that. But I love Ghatak, and I love his use of cinema, the medium, sound, the flair of Ghatak. It's enviable. There's Guru Dutt. So many filmmakers in India. Every time I can't sleep at night, I put on a film called Amarkot and I go to sleep. Good films, you can sleep with it. It's a kind of a nice world, I really like Mrinal Sen's Bhuvan Shom. I really like Agden Pratidin. I like Arvindan Thumb. Of course, everybody likes a lot of Iranian cinema and everybody likes Majid Majidi now. And there's a film that I really liked a lot recently, which is called The Worst Person in the World.
Oh, it's a lovely film.
Very brilliant. I really think The Vanishes of Encheren is outstanding. I like the Latinos also. I mean, the Mexicans these days, all three of them are wonderful filmmakers.
I'm assuming Gulmero del Toro, Quran, and
Inaritu.
Yeah.
Inaritu. All three of them are wonderful filmmakers. There's another filmmaker, I think Argentina, a guy called Pablo Trapero. He made El Buenaresa, about a police precinct.
Last few questions. Are you a foodie, and do you have any food recommendations for us?
I'll tell you what the best food in the world is. I'm from Lucknow, my childhood, right? So the best food in the world is patle shorve ka mutton, 2 kebabs, pulkas, dal, pyaz, hari mirch. After that, if you can have a malai gilori, these days you can order from anywhere, no, right?
Right.
So there's a shop called Ramasre in Lucknow. Order the malai gilori from there later. And that's the perfect food, I really like South Indian food as well.
Right.
I really like Tamil food and whatever. But if you ask me what is it, then, and then if you go to a good Punjabi dhaba, and then you can have a, paratha and a makhan, or if you go to Amritsar and you have chole bhature, that's the best place to have that, Yeah, everybody, anybody, India is an amazing place for food. But if you ask me what I like most, then that's the food of my childhood. Patle shorve ka gosht, mutton, 2 pieces of kebab, pulka, dal, bhindi ki sabzi, pyaz, nimbu, 1 hari mirch.
I like how you say one Hari Mirch.
I mean, I was married to a bong once,
Yes.
So, I mean, and I was a Bengali Jamai. So, I mean, I mean, Kosha Moncho and the fish made in many ways with bhetki and that tomato chutney at the end and sandesh and mishti doi also is quite a class apart. Huh? So I mean, and I keep going to Calcutta and I love the food there.
You're truly pan-India in that sense that you have covered all the states and the cuisines.
Yeah, I'm quite. I'm this ephemeral thing called Indian. I've lived in Bombay 40 years and from Lucknow. I grew up in a place called Sagar. I lived in Patiala for some time. I studied in Calcutta for 2 months. I've been all over Bengal through. I mean, I keep going to Kerala. Yeah, I know India quite well.
Just one last question on the topic of food, then we'll come to another question. What is the one cuisine in India that people don't appreciate that much, that doesn't get the love that it should?
I would have said bomb cuisine 5, 6 years ago when nobody was talking about it that much. But I think it's changed a bit.
Right.
The Bengali cuisine wasn't getting an all India attention as much as it should have. And for example, 10 years ago, 8 years ago, there wasn't any good Bengali restaurant in Bombay.
Right.
Right. And so I would say Bengali cuisine doesn't get the attention it deserves. For example, Lucknow, Mughlai, Punjabi, it gets all the attention, you know.
Right.
But when you talk about Indian food, nobody says Bengali food.
Right.
Though it's right up there with the best. No?
And lastly, sir, you are now in the process of making your next film, Afwaah. And if there's anything that you could tell us about the film and what we can expect from it.
You can expect a ride. I mean, it's my reaction to our times. It's a thriller. It's about, what happens when rumors run amok, when, you tell a lie and then the lie, repeat a lie often enough, it becomes the truth.
Right.
And it costs someone their life, And actually there was nothing. So the film is about, nothing. Actually nothing happened.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But so much happened as a result of nothing. I made a film called Israat Ki Subani long ago. In a single night, I went back to that film, but it's not, in any way concerned with the same subject matter. But this is another film. It's a story of about 6-8 hours, It's got a great cast. Nawaz, of course, everybody knows, and Bhumi will surprise the hell out of you. She's very, very good, Bhumi Pednekar. There's Sharif Hashmi, Sumit Vyas, another guy called Sumit Kaul, whom I worked with in Tanav. There's a girl called TJ Bhanu. The whole cast is quite outstanding. I found a Colombian DOP called Mauricio Vidal. Has done some really outstanding. And there's, I have a producer like Anubhav Sinha, So that kind of works really well, because, you have to have somebody good watching over your back, watching your back for you. So, and it's a film not possible without, the backing of somebody like Anubhav. So, I mean, I've tried to make a very exciting, a thriller, but which sort of kind of explores what the trigger of it is and what's happening around us now.
Amazing. We are really, really looking forward to it. And sir, before we wrap this, is there anything that we didn't ask you and you would like to talk about? कोई ऐसी चीज जो रह गई हो कि यार हमने इसकी बात नहीं की and you would like to talk about it?
मैं तो हमेशा लोगों से कहना चाहता हूँ कि यार ये जो लोग हैं, हमारी जो ऑडियंस है, ये बहुत ही आलसी है. The popular cinema audience is a great audience. They love their stars. They go out and meet them. No, they go out in droves and they dance in the aisles and they celebrate the cinema that they like. But our audience doesn't seem to, it's too laid back. They don't seem to, the point is, you don't have to like everything.
Right.
As long as it engages, this whole thing about like and dislike, provokes you. As long as you even dislike something intensely and it provokes a discussion, that's what you need to do. Need to be more, our audiences need to be more interactive. I'm not saying you have to love my film. I'm saying you have to see my film and you have to react to it. And maybe that will make me a better filmmaker. right? And that would create an environment for more films to be made. I'm very clear about, till the audience does not have genius, films will not have genius. Please subscribe to this channel called Chalchitra Talks. I had a great time talking to them. Seems like a bunch of very interesting things, and they talk about many things, and but necessarily don't have to do with some exact. So it's a fun interview, and so you read cinema. There's a great line by a guy called C.L. James, who says that, what do they of cricket know? Who only cricket know. So what do they of cinema know? Who only cinema know, right? So, I mean, I think when you go around and talk about many things, then cinema is just part of it, part of a whole cultural experience, which includes food, the things in life. So, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. This was
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much.